hundreds and hundreds of submissions, nothing has ever been able to fulfill the challenge. How in the world is anybody ever going to fulfill this challenge?
Read the terms and conditions on the illustration of the IUL. Yours was the only one. Your policy was such an anomaly.
It goes from $461 down to $0. So there's a heck of a lot of cost of insurance in there. $600,000 a year to keep this thing going. That can become a huge risk.
You're telling me simultaneously it's possible to be solved, and then you just said it can't be solved. What is it?
What are you doing? What are we even talking about? This is
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the BetterWealth Show. I'm here with Revan, Tyler, and Jonathan. A couple weeks ago, we came out with a video that Jonathan and I did titled, Did He Just Beat Life 180's $25,000 IUL Challenge? In that video, Jonathan talks about his perspective as it relates to that challenge, some of the dialogue going back and forth. And then later in that video, we talked about IUL, whole life, and some of the philosophies around that. Obviously, in all the videos that I do, if anyone gets mentioned, they always have the opportunity to come on, share their perspective, and that's exactly what is happening. Is Revan, you're here. I don't think you need any introduction. I think you've been on my show more than anyone else outside of internal team members. I don't think you need an introduction. But Tyler, you are the brilliance behind the scenes. You were the tech guy that was having tech issues today, but you're the person that is doing lots of cool things on AI, running operations, and really is the person behind the scenes making a lot happen. And I'm very glad that you could be on here as well. My thought for today would be that we give you and Revan a chance to just address, and we talk as long as we need as it relates to the IUL challenge, because some of the things that were said, I want them to be addressed. We have a dialogue. Obviously, I know you, especially Revan, you get fired up. Totally good. I want to keep this as I want to keep this container, but I want this to be a platform for us to freely speak and say what we need to say. And then if there's time, I would love to talk about IUL, universal life, whole life. And I would imagine when it's all said and done, there's going to be a lot more things that we agree on than disagree. And so I think it's important for people to be able to see and document this whole thing. Is there anything else that needs to be mentioned before we get going in this video?
Well, if you think I get fired up, wait until I let Tyler rip. So, but it's no, I'm excited to just have this conversation. I created the IUL challenge 4 years ago to have these conversations. Like, I know there were a lot of comments made. I'm going to let Tyler go into a lot of detail on the nuances behind that, because he's the one who, quite frankly, has put a lot of his time and energy into it. He's the guy who's kind of running that whole show at this point in time, and so that's why he's here. Like the goal here is to just create a better conversation around this whole topic, and I'm hoping we, I think it'll all play out.
Awesome. Tyler, welcome to the BetterWealth Show, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for letting us, the opportunity to kind of clarify, what's going on.
Absolutely. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to you. And then Jonathan, I'm sure there'll be many things that you'll want to address or talk about, but I'm going to let Revan and Tyler have the floor, since there was a 54-minute video that shares your perspective. And so without further ado, gentlemen, I'll hand it over to you. And I'm, again, very grateful for you all being here.
Yeah, so
Tyler, let her rip.
Yeah, so I got two things, and then I want to get into everything else. So I watched your video, and it seems like the conversation was, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jonathan, that that you largely agree with everything that Chris Revan says about IUL. You talk about the horrific practices. You talk about the loans setting up people for failure. You talk about how it's very much largely missold and misrepresented. And those are a lot of the things that we agree with, right? So is that still like relatively the same? Like, are we?
My position hasn't changed at all, and I think I did hopefully a fair job in describing that I don't disagree with that fundamental thesis from Revan's standpoint or your standpoint whatsoever. I have seen a lot of the similar issues in the space in terms of mispositioning and misselling. And so my criticism of the challenge was in no way a reflection of the criticism of the content that you put out in terms of your critiques of IUL and over sort of sold there. So no, I didn't disagree with that whatsoever.
Yeah. So let me tell you kind of what's happened since that video's come out, right? I'm sure you've read the comments, Caleb, on your channel. We get private emails, messages, submissions on our side and on comments on our stuff saying, oh, it was only a matter of time, and so, you kind of throw this, and I'm going to just kind of bring it up truthfully and kind of painfully. It's, you have this kind of clickbait title for marketing, like, hey, did you beat the IUL challenge? I'm going to come out and say formally no. We'll talk about why in a little bit, but I'm going to make sure I make that very clear. I will give our references. I will say where we mishandled a couple of things with you, Jonathan, so everything's super transparent. But you come out with this video, you talk all this time about how you agree with us. In certain cases, IUL can work. We're going to talk about that as well. But then we get blasted about all of these agents that just grasp onto, oh, I knew IUL could work. And so you play into this whole thing about how like, oh, like somebody submitted, I knew it was only a matter of time before somebody could prove everything that Revan and Chris is saying wrong. And now that's all people say is like, oh, see, it can work for everything that we've been selling it as. And so I just want to be very clear that is what happens.
I'm gonna hop in here. I'm going to hop in here just to help give a little context. So the challenge, and Jonathan, this isn't necessarily your fault. This is where I'm going to like give Caleb and Joel a hard time. And I get the game, right? Like you're trying to create better click-through rates and better thumbnails and a better hook to keep people captivated and all this stuff. But at the beginning, when it's basically like making it look like the IUL challenge was blown up and lost and like, and it really kind of does IUL work, and the hook makes it sound like it does. So the challenge is like when people watch that, it would blow your mind how many people have reached out to us that watched maybe 2 minutes of your video that were like, oh, you're wrong. Like it does, like IUL does work. Even Caleb's video says it does. And so it's just like, granted, I mean, there's only so much you can do, right? Because if they don't watch the whole video, it's on them. But that's why, you and I, Caleb, have had talks offline about my challenge with that, like kind of clickbaity, like hype marketing and like all that crap. And so when you do that at the beginning, to me, like I get starting a better conversation, but that's just, it's like borderline like dangerous journalism in a way, right? Where you're just like giving a fragment of the truth and kind of like picking pieces out to create hype. And then because we live in a world where people have the attention span of a gnat. And so it's like they watch 2 minutes of it, 3 minutes of it, and then they bounce thinking that they got the whole story because of the hook, And so it's just tricky. And like, I'm not trying to be critical because I get the balance of like,
and we do the same
early
thing.
part and yeah, to a level. And it's just, we also, I just, whatever. Obviously it's just something that the fallout on this for us has been significant, like we've had a lot of people reach out and it's like a lot. I don't mind people reaching out, but when people are reaching out with idiotic comments because they watched just like a portion of a video and that portion of the video is so bold and so strong and so whatever that they think they got the whole story, to me, that's like something that I think should be addressed. But
you should tell them to go watch the full video. It would help our watch time.
I know. I did. I always do.
Ironically, I just want to be very clear. Out of all the videos that I've done, this was a 10 out of 10 video, which Revan, I know you know what that means. So it's not like hey, listen, I want to have. Originally, when we were in Florida, we had a sit down, and that's when you mentioned it, Revan, when you're like, hey, we actually had this, and I think Jonathan, I don't want to speak for you, but I think you saw that video, reached out, and so I didn't think much of it because it was. So there's probably some things that, we can all learn from, but I did not think that this was, I just thought like, hey, this is a great opportunity to have more conversations. Totally. And again, I don't want to put words in your guys' mouth. I know that you were wanting to have a conversation with Jonathan on your channel. So all that to say, I'm with you. on it is frustrating when someone just takes a video out of, like a clip out of context.
Yeah.
But I don't know what to do other than have a video that's it comes to a different conversation around like
for sure.
So I think that could be something, but I want to keep it on. The real question is, because you can point people to this video, I want to talk about first and foremost about the IUL challenge and set the record straight and have dialogue, and we can disagree, because I would imagine that Jonathan most likely disagrees with you. And so I want there to be a dialogue, and then people can, at the end of this, they can determine what they want to determine.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So, and I'm going to say our mistakes, because I do think there were some mistakes in the way we handled the communication with Jonathan. I'm going to say what we disagree with on Jonathan, and Jonathan, just let me know if I misspeak, and then what we feel is true. Right. And so, a couple things that were handled poorly. I'm going to put the blame on Revan just because I can.
I'll take it.
But
I'll take it.
But
it's cool.
It's easy to shift the blame to him. So our terms and conditions are kind of listed everywhere. We've done a couple website overhauls because Jonathan submitted this back kind of Q4 of 2025. So we have done a little bit of, but it's always been at the bottom of the page, and it's actually always been in the where you submit when you submit the illustration of the requirements, there's a whole terms and conditions link, and those haven't changed. I've actually added a couple in 2026. I'm happy to discuss those, but those are all labeled of like when they were added. Okay, nothing to do with more recent submissions, more recent things that I see in the future if we. Regarding index changes, because now people are changing index names, and so I just trying to get ahead of a couple things. So a couple things. So I definitely own, Revan and Jonathan had a email dialogue kind of going back and forth. Revan oversimplified the challenge, which is where I think a lot of the contention or confusion or whatever, however you want to call it, kind of started to stem from was, well, Revan described it this way. Our terms and conditions described it the other way. And with that, we'll take some blame for that. But terms and conditions are kind of like what matters. I mean, it's like if you see an ad for a 0% APR in a car and you go in and you go in to buy the car, there's a ton of terms and conditions related to it. Look at your video. It's always this kind of like marketing ploy. Yeah, it's that simple. Submit it, see the terms and conditions. Yeah, it's marketing. And so I'm not going to apologize for that. Well, yes, we should have pointed him directly to the terms and conditions, but it's
for sure. And I'll own that, my part in that too. So Jonathan, I'll say like I should have just directed you to the terms and conditions. I guess that was my mistake in that. However, like there is an element. I'm sure Tyler will get into this a little bit, but there's an element of this where this. When you think about the spirit of the IUL challenge, like why I created this in the first place, it isn't, and I've never said this, and this is the one part that you said, Jonathan, and you've said it multiple times. You've said it in the emails. You said it on the video. I say that IUL can never work, and that I say that everywhere. I never say that. I say IUL is misrepresented. I say that IUL doesn't work for tax-free income in retirement. Heck, there's an occasion, really rare, that we will use IUL from an estate planning perspective. It's extremely rare, but in those situations, it can work in a certain, framework. Like, I don't believe there's a good or bad products. I don't believe IUL is good or bad. I believe it's aligned or misaligned with what people are trying to accomplish, right? And the challenge is not that it's bad, it's that it's misaligned with the problem that people are buying it for typically, right? Like, and the entire purpose of the IUL challenge, or my contention, is that 95 to 99 or maybe even more of IUL products that are sold on the guise of accumulation, tax-free retirement, stuff of that nature, right? Because that's what people are out there pushing, hawking, whatever.
And to support that claim, LIMRA came out, Wink, if you ever look at like Wink research with, I think her name's Cheryl, Caleb, she'd be a good one to like reach out. I don't necessarily agree with her comments.
Cheryl Moore?
Yeah.
Is it Cheryl Moore? Yeah, she's great.
You can look it up. 80%, I think it was 76% of IULs, and this is just by category of the product name, is accumulation IULs. So
just to be clear,
we're just pulling this
right.
out of thin air that like we're targeting the majority of sales.
Revan's assertion of 99% is not 99%, right? It's 3/4, at least by the statistics that you just posted.
Mm-hmm. Sure, that's one person's independent. Sure, that's one person's independent study. But you got to understand that my contention is not the industry. My contention is I do this education on YouTube. I do it on Instagram. I do it on TikTok. And when if we look at the amount of marketing around IUL, 99% of it is about tax-free income, accumulation, whatever. It's nobody gives a crap about the protection-based IUL markets. Very few people, I shouldn't say nobody, very few people really have that as the focus of their business. And we're going to get into that later, as far as, what that can look like, what our perspective is. But I want to make it very, very clear. I've never said that they don't work ever. They just are misrepresented and they don't work for that. Right. And so you made the comment, Jonathan, that I always say that they don't work. I've got video after video after video. Tyler went through, pulled out links and transcripts and is like, what is he even talking about? I say all the time where it can work, how they're misrepresented and where they actually might fit in occasionally.
And I will add 2 cents to that. Is when we come across videos like MPI or Flex Method or Kaizen or some of these extreme cases, I'll be bold and I'll say, I don't think they'll work. I just don't believe they will. And
and so when you say, just to be clear, because I think language is important, when you say they don't work, are you talking about they're going to underperform? You're talking about, are they going to blow up?
They're not going to work as sold.
They're not going to work as sold. They're going to underperform. You're going to be disappointed by the results. If you're sold, like MPI as an example, right? I'm just going to throw them under the bus. You're buying this concept that's all this leverage. We just did a video on MPI and the massive misrepresentation of that and the crap that Curtis Ray and Pace Morby are doing behind the scenes, right? All of that, to me, it's criminal. To me, the things that they're doing, the way that they're positioning it and representing how IUL actually works and what the results will be with that, it's insane to me, what they're getting away with. And so, yes, that's that. Now, the reason I brought up what I did, and then I'm gonna shut up and let Tyler talk, is to me, context is everything. The context of this challenge never had to do anything with protection, ever. It was always about accumulation, about tax-free retirement for income, and about having a better conversation about how these products don't work for that based on current assumptions. And that's why we always had stuff in there to protect, because Jonathan, I got to give him credit. He built this. What is it exactly what I would have done? No, but on the scale of being responsible and selling IUL and reducing illustration rates or assumption rates and all these things, he did a bang up job. It was literally one of the best IUL illustrations I've ever seen. So but even then, there's still elements of it that I would look at and be like, I wouldn't do that.
And so we'll definitely get into that, Revan, in a second. But you're saying it is the IUL challenge, if you had to boil it down. And again, you're a marketer. I understand. You just called me out for being too marketing. But it's the intent is, because I literally wrote down the word intent just as because I think that's important, is you're saying, hey, IUL is being sold as a lifetime retirement deal, as a retirement supplement, and you're saying that there's a lot of issues, and especially when it comes to how things are being projected on an illustration, and then it really shows up in the income, because the illustration looks great, but it really gets highlighted when it comes to income. We're talking maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 years out, lots of assumptions being made. And and so that's the idea. And there's a 10 years, I believe. So your whole deal is, you weren't even looking at the income though. I believe you were saying, hey, if an index universal life, show me an index universal life that was sold with current assumption? Like, talk to me about that.
Yeah, sold with current assumptions. So the reason we have the 10-year look back is because we want to add a surrender period. And the reason, I mean, we need to look at, the design matters though, right? Because if you ratchet down the assumed rates, to be a more protection-based product, and you have a design that's more of a protection-based product, well, then everything's a little bit different. If you have a survivor-based product, that's completely different. The pricing, everything is different.
Talk to me about what assumed is. Is that like the max that you can do, or like what the default?
Yeah,
it's the default current assumption on the illustration.
Which is
carrier.
What right now? Is it 7%, 6%?
No. Every company's different.
Okay, and is it pretty easy to know? Like 10 years ago, like what their
10 years ago, your 7.5% to 8% was the assumed rate on average.
It
But
depends on a carrier by carrier basis, right? I mean, the same pre-AG49, it was not as clearly defined. For the most part, it was a 25-year look back period, an average of that rate, but carriers had discretion, right? And so that's also where some of this gets sort of murky, is from carrier to carrier, there was ease and non-ease of necessarily obtaining those from the original illustrations. Also, though, some of the time carriers had the ability to basically illustrate whatever they wanted to in these illustrations, up to points which are egregious, right? I mean, that would have never come before in any kind of cap, rate environment whatsoever.
Absolutely.
But even since AG 49, there's been a lot of problems. The AG 49 did not solve the problems. Let's be real.
It moved the problem in a different direction, right? I mean, to some degree, sure.
So in other words, if someone came in, they sold an IUL for accumulation, and they used anywhere 7% or above, and it happened to make or outperform the illustration, that would be clean in your books. And Jonathan, and obviously for those of you that just watched 2 minutes of our hook and then bounced, Jonathan, you want to explain how this policy was designed, because it was mainly for estate planning purposes, and that's one of the reasons why you were so conservative. But just for the viewers, you want to explain what you did in a nutshell.
I think Revan and Tyler, did cover it well, right? There are different focal points of why Index Universal Life is sold, and the main, agitator in the industry, right? The one that gets the most marketing dollars behind it at the carrier level, the one that has the sort of flashiest headlines, entirely surrounds accumulation-oriented products and taking distributions from those, right, at some point in the future, and the accumulation on a tax-deferred basis of the policy value. There's different uses for Index Universal Life. The one that I submitted, that was not the focal point. The focal point of it was to have a death benefit that was as large as possible through life expectancy and beyond. And so in that respect, it was vastly different than the type of policy that Life 180 is typically addressing, I would say, in the content that they put out and criticize, and just overall what we see in the sort of dialogue in social media and beyond. It was vastly different in that respect.
So can I ask a question, Jonathan? Do you ever sell IUL for tax-free income, for accumulation, for all that?
Yes.
How come you didn't submit one of those policies to win the challenge?
Typically not greater than 10 years, but they also wouldn't fulfill your requirements, because we don't show maximum AG 49 rates. We're not showing maximum rates, right? Part of this comes to the responsibility of the agent selling the policy. And absolutely. I, philosophically, and because I know enough about the product and how to position, will never show the maximum illustrative rate. The entire, in my mind, issue with part of the industry is taking this AG 49 now sort of guideline and just showing it at that maximum rate in perpetuity, linear returns, et cetera, and not doing any of the things that are diligent, be more, I would say, responsible in the selling of any life insurance product, which is to stress test, to look at alternatives, to present different outcomes to clients and arrange, and then let them make a decision based on, that acquired information. Now,
sure.
Go ahead, and then I can sort of speak to what I think Tyler, some of he said before, because I
was just going to say, just to be clear for Caleb and like the channel. So there's a lot of things in terms and conditions, but the 5 main knockouts, just to be like very clear, and I'm paraphrasing, so like go read them, but essentially
go read them for yourself to be safe.
Yeah, that's the attorney telling me to watch what I say. The big knockouts are the max assumed rates back then, because again, we're trying to there's majority of agents that were selling it using those rates. Very few were knocking it down. And one of the main things is like, okay, there's a lot of agents that I know that were selling using the fixed rates, right? And so like clearly if you illustrated a fixed rate at original illustration and then the following year put it into an S&P 500 index with a cap, it's going to outperform that original illustration. So we had to put some metrics of like, okay, we have to, because people can swap indexes. Some indexes illustrated higher. Some index illustrations performed terribly. Like we'll talk a little bit about that when I show our calculator we built for like the JP Morgan Mosaic.
When you say max assume rates, what is the max assume rates today at a current carrier?
No, that's the thing. Every carrier is different. And that's the challenge with what Jonathan's saying too, is like not every carrier lets you manipulate the rates and lower them. You get a lot of these carriers, like your rate that you illustrate at is the rate you illustrate at. They tell you, here's the AG49 rate. This is what you're using, period. And every product might be a little bit different. Every index would illustrate different, or, the current assumption would be different based on the carrier. But there's
every year it changes based on like, the products that were so part of the issue is like you go back and you look 12 years ago, cap rates were at 10, 12, 13%. Those products have all been discontinued and now the cap rates are down to 8, 9, 7, depending on the company. The average, I would say, if you look out of I've looked at hundreds, if not thousands of illustrations now. If I look at the 5 major ones that we get the most submissions is National Life Group, Allianz, Nationwide, and Pac Life. Those are like the 4-ish main companies that were really in
Transamerica.
Yeah, I mean those.
Transamerica too.
We just don't get like but they were between 6.75 and 7.75, like depending on.
Did you say Allianz too?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. So that's where distribution is much big. Like that's where there's just more distribution for those companies. It's not like those companies are worse than all the other companies, or like if you get a policy with a company we didn't name, you're in better position. It just means there's much less distribution of those other companies.
So that's point number one. What's the second point, Tyler?
That kind of manipulation of indexes. The other big ones were like rate, and I'm not saying Jonathan's any means. I'm just stating rules, right? Rate changes, manipulation of premium. We've had people manipulate like, hey, I illustrated 12 and then they started putting in 15, which is why we ask for original stuff from the carrier directly, just so we can verify. We've had people literally manipulate the illustration. Jonathan definitely didn't do that, right? But I'm just saying all this.
Send you a fraudulent,
Yes, I've seen it. I've seen
people,
it all.
Times are tough, guys. Times are tough.
And so
it's crazy, man.
So those are, somebody at table B got moved up to standard, right? They went to level death benefit earlier than the original. Like we see it all. So like, there's a reason why we kept it there. The other ones are because of the pricing. We really in our thing is protected IULs. Like they're different pricing. Like Corebridge has one now that's like literally they have an accumulation IUL and they have a protection IUL. Protection IUL, you can manipulate those indexes. They price it differently. Jonathan submitted one of those. So and then also survivorship and lump sum 1035s because it's not a rollover challenge. Like in our opinion, it's again the 75%. Hey, I'm going to pay $12,000 a year for 15 years and take out income. Like that's the target. So
can I offer a little bit of just commentary on the challenge? I mean, from my perspective, and then, we can continue this dialogue.
Sure. Go for it.
I want to be clear that I very much appreciate the content that you guys put out. And I think a lot of it is informative. And for the average consumer who's not working with an insurance professional who is knowledgeable and diligent and all of these things, they are good things to safeguard themselves from abusive practices that are, in the industry that both of you and we all collectively acknowledge. I still maintain, and I can bring you my perspective. I mean, on this conversation, the challenge is unwinnable, and it's unwinnable because of the language that you guys are highlighting that we're talking about. So I'll give you an example on the one that we just discussed, right? Protected, guaranteed, or principal protected IUL products. Well, as you guys know, or as consumers should know, all effective IULs that have been sold, for my mind, since the inception have no lapse guarantees on them. Now, there's different no lapse guarantee durations, and some of them can be elongated or shortened depending on the nature of the product. But if you buy, sure, I don't think that you can eliminate the no lapse guarantee on a random accumulation design.
As soon as you take loans from it, with most companies, the no lapse guarantee goes out. Which most people are illustrating loans within 20 years or whatever the no lapse duration is. So
if I go into any carrier software today, right, and I design an accumulation-oriented IUL with whatever degree of funding and whatever it says, there's going to be a 5-year or longer no lapse guarantee that is built into the nature of the product. And oftentimes the no lapse guarantee is longer. It's 10 or 15 or 20 years. Now, these are long-term well, the language that disallowed in your challenge is protected, guaranteed, or principal protected IUL products. So there, right alone, you are effectively saying, well, will you give Life 180, you give yourself an opportunity to invalidate any and all of these illustrations that have no lapse guarantees. Now, maybe that's not the intention, right? The spirit of the conversation. But by letter of the law, by letter of your own terms and conditions, you are invalidating these policies, right? I'll give you another example, right? The abusive practices that you talk about are overfunded designs by nature, typically, right? When people are designing accumulation-oriented IUL, they are trying to pay much more than the internal charges in the early stages in order to accumulate and then compound policy value. There's language in your terms and conditions. Overfunded premiums designs may be disallowed in whole or in part at the sole and absolute discretion of Life 180 if such funding is determined to materially distort comparative results or undermine the integrity of the challenge. Well, that's very subjective. You are effectively giving yourself the opportunity to invalidate any sort of overfunded designs. I mean, tell me where I'm wrong.
Answer that.
Okay.
These are language that you guys put in your own terms.
Yes, let me address that.
Sure.
Did you read that last sentence again? Just so I want to read the last part of that.
If such funding is determined to materially distort comparative results or undermine the integrity of the challenge.
Yeah. So what I said earlier is there's nothing in there. Specifically, I say 1035 single pays, right? There's a specific section for regarding those policies.
Yep.
Overfunded policies are not disallowed. It's up to our discretion because of the exact reason of, you have any idea how hard it is to get the information on a 10-year-old policy that was sold at $10,000 a year? Then 1 year the guy comes in and puts in 20. Then 1 year he comes in and puts in 30. Then 1 year he comes in and puts in 5. We have to be able to manage the integrity of the challenge. And so that's why there's the word may in there. It's not guaranteed. Like, there's a reason why we have that language in there from an attorney perspective to protect us. And if you think we're not going to protect us from a $25,000 reward, I mean, come on.
Well, and it's an integrity thing too. It's not saying you can't do an overfunded policy. It's basically saying if you're overfunding what the original illustration was at, that's going to disqualify the policy. That's ultimately what the intent of that,
and we don't get those
disclaimer is.
I mean, I still have yet to see one of those, so.
But and to that point, like you say, it's never going to win. Like, listen, the last 10 years has been the greatest bull run. We've been participating in the greatest run up in stock market history. For everybody that says, oh, IUL's upside potential, downside protection, you save money, you can never lose. First of all bull crap, like you can lose in an IUL. I see it every day, literally every day. And then secondly, if you ran an illustration 10 years ago, even at AG 49 rates, current assumptions, like with what they were, because AG 49 existed in 2016. So the cool part is when I started this challenge, people could use that excuse. They could be like, oh, well, illustrations before AG 49, because it was 2022 to 2012. We're in 2026 now, y'all. AG 49 was 2015. So we've now got 11 years back, after the fact. So there should be a ton of policies, thousands and thousands of policies from 2015 and 16 that people could do where they can run these illustrations and get us the original in force. And during that time, the greatest bull run. And if the policy wasn't able to just perform as illustrated, even at AG 49 rates, what the hell are we even talking about? What are these things even doing? There's no upside potential. You're not capturing the upside potential because the policy performance has nothing to do with what the S&P index does or what the index does. It has everything to do with the internal costs, fees, charges, par rates, cap rates, spread charges, all the things that go into the equation that the insurance company can and will change, and historically has changed to the detriment of the policyholder. And so, like, you can talk to me theoretically and speculatively about everything that these policies can possibly potentially do in a vacuum or a bubble, but I don't really care about what's possible. I care about what have you shown me you're going to do with these things and how do they function. And principally speaking, and we'll get into this later, the whole conversation about IUL versus whole life is just a function of control. There is no free lunch in the insurance game. Like, if you think you're going to get upside potential, downside protection, no loss provisions, all these things that go with it, you're going to get flexible premiums, you're going to get all these things, and you're going to get a better return. You think the insurance company is going to take all that risk on and not shift it to the client? If you believe that, I got a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you. Like, it's not going to work.
The way it's sold, again, we're talking about the way most, and on its training, it's carrier issues. So it's downstream distribution issues. I talked to,
that's the thing. Over
the past few weeks, I've talked to several people high up in distribution channels of major insurance carriers. I've talked to, I can see it in our own, I was a career agent with Mass Mutual for 5 years. I saw it when the brokers came in to try to train me when I was 7 years ago in the business. I saw exactly how the training is. I saw exactly how they taught you how to sell it. I was there. I sold too back when I first started my second year in the business, 9 years ago now. Oh, almost 10. So 9 years ago, right? Before I knew anything. When you're a young agent, you're so gullible to believe what you idolize somebody, a mentor, somebody that comes in, maybe they're making more money than you, maybe they're drive a nice car, that you see the life that they live, and then they say, like, this is how I made this money, and this is the greatest product ever. And so you, as a young guy, I was in my 20s, I say, holy cow, look how great this is. I can go sell this. I can go sell this to my parents without asking any questions. Luckily, I met some people year 3, and I was able to backtrack the few that I sold, and luckily Mass Mutual was very, like, whole life.
I want to give Jonathan the ability to respond to anything, like, because I want to make sure that we're addressing everything that needs to be addressed. And so, Jonathan, floor is yours on anything that you have further questions, statements.
No, I think that Tyler and Revan have experienced and are seeing so much of bad agent practices and so much of sort of the bad carrier practices that exist also, that they fundamentally get disillusioned by means of just exposure to the vast majority of the way that agents behave. And so I think that if you're exposed to all of these agents behaving in a certain way all the time, and you see it over and over again from client submissions and other things like that, you're going to fundamentally believe that every single agent acts the same way, that nobody is acting with integrity. And then when shown, hey, look, people are out there trying to be as professional as possible in positioning and selling permanent life insurance with appropriate needs analysis and doing their due diligence and going through financial plans and all other aspects that I think we would all fundamentally agree are good practices, their thinking is, oh, well, this must be either an aberration that's completely non-existent in the industry, or there's somebody out there trying to cheat this challenge. And I just maintained, and I mean, I don't think that any of when I just put forth, language that you have specific in it, right, it gives you an opportunity to invalidate. That's my entire thing, right, is that you can go and say that the spirit of the challenge is one thing, and maybe it very well is. But also, Tyler, to your 100%. Point, like, you've had hundreds of pieces of content, right, surrounding IUL and many pieces of content surrounding the challenge. Has the terms and conditions ever been disclaimed in any of these pieces of video content? Has it ever been embedded in any of the videos or anything like that?
I mean, I tell everybody to go to rescuemyiul.com, where everything to even submit the terms and conditions are right there. Like,
Revan, I can tell you that in my own personal experience as a consumer of your content, the reason that I even first reached out to you to submit this was because I had zero idea of anything of the terms and conditions. All I kept seeing was video after video of your content saying, this is the criteria for the challenge, these are the bold point notes, whatever, and no mention whatsoever of, oh, but in reality, there are 10 or 15 different items that preclude or disallow any of sort of submissions associated with it.
Yeah, but don't bypass that, because in every video, I may not be like, hey, go check the terms and conditions, but I say, to learn more, to submit, if you think you have a winner, go to rescuemyiul.com, submit it, and all the information you need is there. Like, that's it. Like, So the terms and conditions are in the process of even the submission. So if you had a thing you submitted because you skipped the terms and conditions, that's not my problem, quite frankly.
Well, like I said, I maintain that in the terms and conditions, right, it's impossible to win. So let me ask you a question then. Do you guys know approximately how many submissions?
But you're saying that after the fact.
No,
hundreds,
I'm saying
hundreds
that
and hundreds.
now I have an opportunity to read the terms and conditions, right? After, I initially submit this, et cetera. I come back and have a conversation with Caleb because I fundamentally don't think that there is the ability for any policy that's been sold to actually fulfill it. And not because even necessarily that all of these practices are so egregious, but because you guys have given yourself language inside of the terms and conditions to inherently invalidate any illustrations. I'll give you another example here, right?
Yeah.
Illustration requirements. So we're talking now post AG 49, right? Not include alternate, blended, midpoint, or modified assumptions, right? Just so everybody knows, you are required by law in illustrations under AG 49 to include a midpoint illustration. Does that then invalidate all of the post AG 49 illustrations?
No, that's not the point. You're conflating. You're conflating the point.
Language
I'm just moving off the language from your terms and conditions of what is disallowed.
We're just saying we're not using the midpoint as the challenge. It's the current assumption, not the midpoint, that matters. We're not using the midpoint as the point.
That's already stated in your other terms and conditions of you have to show the maximum illustrative rate.
Jonathan, let me ask you a question. Have you ever worked with an attorney? Have you ever tried to put terms and conditions together to make sure that everything's done? And hired a high level attorney to help you do something like this? Like, if you think that they're not going to go through every little thing and make a little nuanced button up thing, just because that's in there talking about how because it's redundant, that it was already assumed that it was based on the current assumptions, that the attorney's not going to make us put an extra line in there to smack you in the face to be like, hey, just in case you're dumb and don't realize it, that this is about the current assumption already, like that the midline doesn't count as a win. Like, that's all that is. So don't conflate it to make it something it's not.
I wonder if in all of this, it comes down to just a fundamental disagreement of, I see all of this as, you guys directed me, okay, look at the terms and conditions. This is the legally binding language of something. And the legally binding language in multiple instances gives you an opportunity to never fulfill the challenge. Now, also of mine that I'm seeing is in 4 years of submission, and to your own, counting, hundreds and hundreds of submissions, nothing has ever been able to fulfill the challenge. So let's take them both in their face, right? You've been having this challenge for 4 years. You've raised the prize money multiple times in that time frame from whatever it was, $1,000 or $2,000 originally to $25,000 now. There's been hundreds and hundreds of submissions. Nothing has ever been able to fulfill it. And simultaneously, you have terms and conditions that also allow for you to have the full discretion to not only change those terms and conditions at any time, but also invalidate a lot of those illustrations by means of all of these specific legalese. And again, that at your discretion. So for the average consumer or the average insurance professional then looks at maybe this scenario and says, how in the world is anybody ever going to fulfill this challenge?
Can I show you?
Under the actual stated guidelines that you guys have.
Can I show you? Yeah, and Tyler, before, I just want to be really clear. If someone does right now go submit it, you guys can't change the rules after the fact. Okay.
Not after the fact. We could change it on any future submission, but not anything in the past.
Okay, so Tyler, what were you going to say?
Yeah, am I allowed to share my screen? Because I'll show you exactly what will win. I just don't think it exists.
Can I just say really quickly also to that point, in their terms and conditions is, quote, these terms and conditions are subject to change without notice. It speaks nothing to previously submitted illustrations. It speaks nothing to any sort of timeline associated with when these are. They have the full discretion to change the terms and conditions at any point they want to. Look, Revan, you can say all you want to, oh, this was guided by legal guidance, and I'm sure it was. Legal guidance has put you in a position to effectively not have to ever pay if you don't want to.
So Jonathan, I'll say this, and Tyler, then you can hop in. Out of the hundreds and hundreds of policies that we've received, and I'm just going to put this out there, the only one that ever, even eclipsed and met the metrics of cash value being higher than the original illustration at year 10 ever. Yours was the only one, like literally. So your policy was such an anomaly that the only reason it was invalidated because it didn't, you lowered the illustrations. You did everything right. So that's a compliment to you. You know what I mean? Like on that level. So, but all the hundreds of other ones, you're saying that there's no way they could win and this and that, whatever. But Nobody won. There's the only submissions we get a lot of submissions from people who don't like seem to care about the fact that I say it's got to be 10 years old, and they send me a 4-year-old policy, and they send us 5-year-old policies, and look how well it's doing. There's a reason we have it going 10 years, and it's got to be at a surrender period because it takes time for these things. And my contention is that one of the biggest problems with IUL is that by the time you realize you have a problem, it's too late. They look like they're doing decent at year 4. I just did a video on a nationwide policy that at year 3 looked great. At year 7, it still doesn't look horrible. But when you run the current illustration on it going out 20 years, it's an atrocity for the current illustration compared to the original illustration, even though at year 7, it still looks like they're only like a couple $100 off of the original rate. So it's like all of these things that have to be taken into consideration. And,
and I'm
just to back up yes, do that. But and I'll end with this, and then I'm going to literally shut up and let Tyler go. When I wrote the book IUL Exposed, I didn't say IUL Exposed, the worst product ever to be sold in the financial industry or anything of that nature. I said the truth about the most misrepresented product, because on social media, IUL is misrepresented about the problems it solves, the returns it's going to get, the results it's going to get you. And ultimately, that's the problem. When people are putting their money into a vehicle to solve a problem, which, make no mistake about it, that's what everybody's doing, and that there's a misalignment in what the product is designed to do versus the problem they think they're trying to buy it for, that's where the problem exists. And that's why I'm so adamant and passionate about protecting people against this crap. And the last thing I'll say, then Tyler, go, is that this isn't just an agent thing. I would say even you, like, you're way better than most. This is an industry thing, and I might have to hire bodyguards after saying this, but like, this starts at the carrier level. I left the industry as a director of business development for one of the top IUL companies in the country for a reason, because my integrity matters to me. And at a corporate level with I'm going to say all these companies, I don't care. Like they know what they're doing. I can't speak to it because I never worked with Allianz or Pac Life, whatever. I worked with one company, but my experience there was so strong, so toxic, so bad that I know these companies know what they're doing, because there's no way they don't. All they care about is getting premium and pushing the sales conversation down the road, and they're willing to cut corners, they're willing to compromise, they're willing to write off losses, they're willing to settle, they're willing to reimburse premiums for high net worth people that they know are going to take them to court. We see it every single day. Literally, this stuff is happening. And it's middle America that gets caught in the crosshairs and loses their shirts over the marketing that's being perpetuated by the carrier level, and the training and the presentations and everything that the carriers use to train the agents, to train the leaders in the field, is misrepresented. That's why I quit the damn business in the IUL space, because I went to the head of the company and was like, I can't say this. I'm going out training people after doing this for 4 years. Like, this is all full of holes. I can't do this. And they're like, you could do it or you can leave. I said, I guess I got to leave because I have integrity. And so this is a top-down problem. It's not just an agent problem. And when the carriers, who have this like moral, credibility, so to speak, because they're insurance companies, like when they push it down, people just believe them, but they don't realize it's still people on the other side trying to hit quotas and metrics and all this stuff of sales. And they're doing what they have to do to make it. And I'm done.
So the only thing I'm going to add it before, and then Caleb, this is up to you, because I have the illustrations. I'd love to go through them because your illustrations were good, and as well as and show like the work that we do behind when we come to analyze these things. And I know a lot of your comments, Caleb, where people are like, "Oh, show me the numbers. Like, I want to see it." Right. So that's number one. But number two is we do so much outreach against the Doug Andrews, the Curtis Rays, these big PHP FFLs. And there are a lot of the submissions. You don't think if they had one, they would have submitted it. And if we disallowed it, they would have come and been like, done a whole ton of marketing to completely discredit us.
Yeah.
Right. Because yours is the only one we've ever disallowed, to be clear. Like, we haven't disallowed any. Yours is the only one that got disallowed. Nobody else has even come close.
But you said hundreds of people submitted. So do they submit because they're trolling you, or they submit because it's not 10 years, or
They
submit
submit because
they're
it's
gonna
not
win.
10 years.
They look. I've gotten
submit
so
'cause
many.
it's
They're
not
like,
10
look at
years.
year 8. I'm on track.
Got it. Okay. Okay.
I'm on track at year 8, and I'm like, okay, great. Come back to me in 2 years.
And Revan, you've stated publicly you do believe that there'll be a day when you'll pay this thing out, because just
I know it's possible. I know it's technically possible. It's unrealistic to be done, and it's possible. It's not going to happen right now. So here's the deal: it's not going to happen right now because of the way that the carriers have shifted cap rates and par rates and spread charges, and that's the entire point of this challenge, and is to create the conversation around this. That doesn't matter what the S&P 500 does if they change cap rates, par rates, spread charges, all this stuff. That it doesn't. You're not really the performance of the index or the market is irrelevant almost. It's just one piece of a whole plethora of variables that go into the performance of the policy. And it's not even the most important piece. That's the part that's the problem, is people are sold that, like, hey, you're participating in the index, and if it goes up, you get this, and you're protected if it goes bad, and all this stuff. That's one piece of a huge, puzzle that comes to the equation. Now, could the policy long term, we're going to keep the challenge going, if the companies say, hey, based on the rising interest rate environment, based on everything, we could increase cap rates again. We could increase spread charges. We could lower spread charges, increase participation rates, do all these things that are going to actually serve the client. The insurance company has the potential to do that. Might an insurance company do that at some point in time? Maybe. I don't think so. But if they do, then the thing is winning. But remember, the spirit of this is misrepresentation by the agents and by the carriers about what they are.
Yeah.
I know, I worked on the inside. High cap rates, high spread charges, all the things while the policy is in surrender period is a marketing plan, right? Like, they literally use marketing dollars in these companies to effectively pay for higher cap rates at the beginning, so it illustrates better, fully knowing that they're going to reduce them later. Like, this happens, not with every carrier maybe, but it happens. And so when once again, Jonathan talks about our terms and conditions, read the damn terms and conditions on the illustration of the IUL. Tell me how you feel then about what the IUL company is capable of changing in your policy. You want to talk about terms and conditions? Like, it's crazy. Yeah. And so, like, basically they tell you on the illustration, hey, you're going to start this thing, and we can at any point in time change everything, including all the way down to the index that you're even using, right? And so they tell you what they're going to do. And so, like, if that's the case, you can't, Jonathan, make a comment to me about our terms and conditions or one thing when, the illustration is effectively terms and conditions, and they tell you straight up. So by definition of your statement, the IUL company is saying, hey, by the way, you could buy this. We're going to make you think you can get this. But by the way, ultimately, we're never going to let you. That's really what it's doing.
Aspects of different contracts, right? There's contractual, guaranteed minimum floors and things of that nature that are just clearly defined in contract language that are different, the language that you have in your terms and conditions, which is we can change any of this at any given time that we want to. I would also just point out, Revan, that you just said, right now, it can't be solved. You literally just said that under current conditions, unless a carrier decides to go and do X, Y, or Z.
Yeah, but so, how is that our
with
fault?
all due respect, but you're telling me
Jonathan,
at the same time simultaneously, hey, look, it's possible to be solved. And then you just said it can't be solved. Which one is it?
It's possible long term that if these things play out long enough, that the environment may come back around for it. But my contention, once again, I will die on this hill. For the past 10 years, these products have been sold as upside potential, downside protection, for accumulation, for tax-free income. Can we agree that most policies are sold under that premise?
Yes.
Okay. So if that's what's sold, we just came through the greatest bull run of all time. We're still kind of in it, right? The market's 53,000 on the Dow, and the S&P's at the highest it's ever been, pretty much within a margin of error. And so, like, if that's the case, these policies are underperforming their conservative AG 49 illustration, even though, the maximum illustrates, it's not a maximum. It's just like a set AG 49 in most carriers that they don't even allow you. Most agents are saying that it's a conservative number because look at the 25-year history. That's how it's sold. So once again, you got to understand what I'm up against and what I talk against every single day and the things that we see based on the miscategorization and representation about how this all comes together. And so with that, you know, if we got this decade now since AG 49, 11 years of these policies not even performing to their illustrative amounts when, heck, if they were really getting upside potential, that's my biggest problem with them. If they're sold with upside potential, where the hell is it? Where is it? 10 years, 11 years, AG 49 in place, so that's not an excuse. Where are the results? They're not there. Nobody. Nobody. One, if we just take the principles of what the policies say they can do, what the carriers say they will do, how they train the agents to sell them, upside potential, downside protection, that is a carrier conversation. During the greatest bull run of all time, they haven't even reached zero with their current assumptions. So if you can't trust the current assumptions because they can change all the moving targets, all the variables, all the cap rates, all the spread charges, all the par rates, all the cost of insurance, all the everything, what are you doing? What are we even talking about? This is stupid.
So let me show you what can actually win. Caleb, am I allowed to share my screen real fast?
Yeah, you can share your screen. And I think it's also important to note that no whole life would win a 10-year challenge either.
That's not the point.
But I think that's another aspect, and you spoke about that publicly, where it's not necessarily because whole life, while it can be misrepresented, is you're not, if you're going in to try to sell a hype, whole life's not the place that you're not
totally.
Can I just provide a brief moment of commentary? There's plenty of litigation in the whole life world with premium finance ongoing all the time. IUL too, of course.
Totally.
There are absolutely agents out there that sell the hype of whole life. I mean, again, to Tyler's point of where he started his career, I started my career with New York Life. I get it. I'm from the same school of original sort of knowledge and of training. It exists. It just exists in a different form.
Yeah, sure. And you're not wrong. And we've said there's definitely bad actors on the whole life side too. We see it. We see that too. But the bottom line is, if I had to say, it's 1 out of every 10 whole life agents that are doing that, and 9 out of every 10 IUL agents that are bad actors. So it's not an apples to apples conversation. I would argue that most premium finance that's being sold is missold. Whether it's whole life or IUL, that I will. Yeah, for sure.
Do you agree with that, Jonathan?
We do a bunch of premium finance. I totally agree. I've seen some absolutely atrocious designs, with all sorts of different assumptions with, before the lender gets paid back, taking distributions already and taking distributions right after the premium payment period is, all sorts of horrific designs, mostly in the IUL world, but I've seen as of late a whole bunch of whole life ones too, imploding as well. Some of that is uncontrollable. It's just the lending environment and, the borrowing costs, but
still missold.
Listen, I'm aware of the industry and of how in the premium finance world, you see a lot of sort of bad actors and malfeasance as well.
Cool. Yeah, but I just want to add one thing. The premium finance is the top 1 to 5% of agents in the country. It's not a mass, there's no MLM style thousands and tens of thousands.
You guys have been a little critical of one of them lately. That is
Kaizen. What? Because Kaizen's horrible. I'll name them. I don't care.
Sure,
come get me.
Yeah, but my point is, but those are IULs. Those are IUL products. So, but again, premium finance as a whole, both sides have butchered a lot of it.
Tyler, why don't you show the numbers? Because I feel like we've had a lot of conversation, but with no numbers. And to your point earlier, I do think that there are consumers that will want to see
let's do
what the numbers look like, and whether it's the illustration that I submitted or what you're putting forth in terms of things that you prepared. I do think it's good for people to see.
No, it's all your stuff. I do have one as a comparison just so people can see.
Let's show the screen.
So I have two things that I wanted to. So this is a calculator that's going live today, and so when people say what can win, right? So this calculator doesn't take into account cost of insurance, doesn't take anything. This will be on rescuemyiul.com. Feel free to go look at it. It essentially, I don't have all the indexes. I only have a few, but essentially you can see exactly if you go back 10 years. With caps, because again, they're only looking at S&P without dividends. You can see exactly where over a 10-year period, these illustrations have lied. This is before cost of insurance, before anything else. So I can tell you exactly. The problem is everything was illustrated at 10 to 12%, right? And all those products are going back to, 8, 9, at 12%, it looks really good, but they all discontinued those products and they're all floating back around the 7 to 9% range. So you can see exactly where things were sold and what they would kind of look like versus the actual return, which is right here. And this is in the last 10 years, which is like the best decade. You can toggle the thing. You can kind of see, the last 4 years, 5 years has looked really good. Like, there's no argument. There's a reason why we went 10 years back. So there's a chance if they keep the cap rates at the 8 or 9%, right? And we continue to have this bull run of another few years without any negatives, those illustrations that 6.75 to 7% could show that that's what they could match what the original illustration showed. You're relying on the carrier. So you're putting all the power in the carrier. So anyways, I don't want to go too much into this, but I'm showing the math of what would work. Again, no cost of insurance, none of that, unfortunately it's, per policy, per age, per carrier, it's a lot to add. So we submitted 2, survivorship, which was fine. We're going to talk about what we think about it. And then you submitted a single pay, I'm assuming a 1035. I don't, was kind of hard to tell, a little blurry, but, so we submitted 2 different illustrations. This one was slightly behind. The survivorship was about 3% behind the original illustration. And then the survivorship from a cash value standpoint did stay. So what I wanted to quickly just highlight is you go to, and if everybody's okay, I'm going to kind of go through this part fast. So I want to cover the back,
please do.
Right. So essentially 49 and 43, right? Just for transparency, and John, let me know if I'm misspeaking because I'm trying to summarize this, right? But the 49-year-old was standard and the 43-year-old was preferred, decent health. And so we go down here and we see, this is the first page with one. So 30 years, 78 and 72, $15 million worth of coverage, and about 3.3, let's round up, 3.35 million in cash value, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you put in 1.6, you have essentially about double of what you put in, and you have the 15 million of insurance. Okay, all looks good. This was the original, right? In the in-force, he has dialed what he's supposed to do is dial the hypothetical interest rate down, right? So he did a good job there. And now we're gonna switch to like the back half of the years, right? So again, 6%. And when you look at, I want to highlight right here, right? We have 6 million of cash and $15 million worth of insurance, right? And on a, and so can we agree that life expectancy for 2 people, the female, that's a preferred rate, high probability that she lives to late 90s, or not late 90s, I'm sorry, late 80s to mid 90s. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, it's probably like 93 or 94, if I had to guess.
I was going to say 92, so we're all tracking.
Okay. Here's the problem, right? So that I have with these, right, is yes, he illustrated it more conservatively, but at a 3.8%,
which is good,
assumption, which is good, right? This policy, after continuing paying premiums for all of this time, has started to see some risk when the youngest person is age 89. Okay? And so just so everybody can see that we're assuming a 4% illustration, right? 3.8. God, I don't know how you get used to switching so fast, Chris. 3.82%, right? Look, it goes from 461 down to 0. So there's a heck of a lot of cost of insurance in there. And so to me, this is a lot of risk that if it becomes a problem, if we hit a decade of 2000 to 2010, this could be a problem in the future for somebody. is this risk. And so when I run a Monte Carlo analysis on this, right?
Tyler,
So
to be clear, you're
Mm-hmm.
assuming there that the 4 or whatever % is from that focal point in time started when that illustration gets generated in perpetuity, right? The same way that your linear
Correct.
return.
Yes.
So,
Yep.
Again, it would require not just a singular decade of, let's call it 0% returns, but in reality, perpetual 4 whatever % crediting
I would
rate
disagree.
every single year.
Well, that's
I'm
what
just
the
talking
illustration
about the actual mechanics of the policy and how it functions.
Yes.
That's the assumption.
Okay, so right now, what I do is I upload all these illustrations. So this is how I analyze every single illustration. I do a lot of consulting work for multiple people. I'm not really allowed to talk about it, but I do quite a bit of consulting work to analyze certain things. And so I uploaded this illustration into our new kind of probability of success. It runs Monte Carlo analysis based on 8%. I upload only, so it does not calculate net amount at risk, right? So the good is going to be better than what's showed. The bad's going to be worse because it's not calculating the values, the net amount at risk, which is what drives the cost of insurance. It is only showing the cost of insurance and charges based on the actual illustration being present. So I'm just going to throw that disclaimer out there. It gives all that here, but you can see based on the illustration with a simulation to age 90, right, which is ages of the second younger insured, you are at a 98th percentile that it's going to work. Okay? When you start pushing 95, which could very well be somebody, I mean, I had 8 grandparents, half of them lived to their early, like 92 to 94. The other half were dead before 85. So totally, you never know, right? But at 95, start to have quite a bit of range of risk. And so I'm not saying this could happen, but I'm just saying if you educated clients, and so I want your opinion on when you run these IULs, are you running full Monte Carlo of simulations within these illustrations?
If you're asking me, Tyler, it depends on the duration of the no lapse guarantee, right? To some degree, because there are obviously, when you're looking at estate planning kind of designs and protection oriented products with a range of different carriers, you have the ability to toggle in the extended no lapse guarantee duration to whatever you'd like. So you go and you present multiple options, right? So we oftentimes are presenting both a fully guaranteed and also a, let's call it, life expectancy guarantee option. Typically speaking, carriers that offer guarantees that are to life expectancy that are in the late 80s or early 90s are significantly cheaper by a range of premium than the other ones. And you give alternatives, right? One of them, you are transferring the risk entirely to the insurance carrier at a greater amount of acquisition cost, and a greater premium. The other one, you are taking a little bit of what you're highlighting here of longevity risk gamble, right? That somebody is going to both outlive the duration of the no lapse guarantee, and also the policy will underperform the original as sold. If both of those and or a raising of cost of insurance charges, all of these sort of different variables come into play, is there longevity risk in non-fully guaranteed products? There's absolutely that longevity risk that exists. Will the person have an option at that point in which, they can go and either do one of two things, right? Death benefit reduction or increase the premium? Yes, for sure. There are mechanisms to be able to make sure that policies don't lapse. But of course, there's a cost associated with them. And the longer that you go towards a lapse period that may, happen in the future, the more that you are effectively, retaining the risk and also absorbing a degree of what that cost will be later on as you get older, and cost of insurance is inherently higher.
Agreed. So what I believe is if you put these products side by side with most people, I'm not saying anything about this particular one, I'm just stating the facts. For most people, when it comes to estate purposes, Caleb, I'd love your 2 cents. Is if you're buying, if you're going to commit $50,000 a year for the rest of your life, for you and your wife, right, or significant other, and you say, hey, this is for estate tax purposes or estate planning, whatever, you're going to, and you said, well, if I were to ask you, what probability of success would you want to make sure we have to age 100? What would you say?
It would want to be quite high. Can I ask a clarifying question? Yeah. Because I'm by far the one that understands the least about the situation for obvious reasons. So you're assuming you took an illustration at 4%. You're assuming 4%, Tyler. So
well, those are the illustrations he provided. So he gave the in-force, which is the white
and
line.
I just have a clear. What
6%?
could someone make hypothetically in a year?
This is currently the cap rate is set to 9 or 8% in this illustration.
Okay, so there's a world. So we're assuming. I just want to be very clear that in the next 40 years or 50 years, that it never hits an 8%. No, we're also assuming. Is there a floor to this?
This is a Monte Carlo analysis. So this is running 2,000 simulations of various historical returns of the market. So some of those hit. So you can see this is the high 90th percentile, meaning if the market does really good, right? Monte Carlo analysis simulations, you can see it tracks as sold, right? 100%. But there's also the low 10%, right? 2000 to 2010, right? Bad decades, whatever. Those also have to be factored in. The blue line is the median. So that's all this blue line, the median run, which is how every Monte Carlo analysis calculator works when you're running retirement analysis. I just built it in an insurance product.
And I'm curious to hear your thoughts, Jonathan. I mean, longevity is going to be, I don't, again, know nothing about the scenario, but I imagine, and again, I don't want to be the Brian Johnson that says I'm never going to die, and then I feel like I would never want to put that out in the universe, like never, ever. So I will die.
Sounds like you're just challenging God a little bit, right?
I'm not comfortable with that. But I do think from a problem, like my 2-year-old daughter, I think there's a high likelihood that she'll live longer than 100 years with technology and all. And I think I'm hoping to hang around long enough where I can, live past 100. What is your, in light of that, Jonathan, what are things and levers that you, how would you respond to this? Because I do think it's an interesting observation. If someone's putting money for the sole purpose of estate planning, the idea of there even being a 5% or 10% is I'm just wondering, because it's you could probably get a guarantee and there's a cost to that. And I'm just curious to hear your response to that.
Life insurance planning, when you're talking about permanent life insurance, exists on a risk spectrum, right? And so acknowledging the degree of those risks, I think, is the role of a good insurance advisor. And so what we do is, by doing analysis similar to what Tyler does, we quantify what that risk is in different rate assumptions. If you're talking about guaranteed variable, right, that there's a minimum floor, that if the underlying sub-accounts just horrifically underperform, well, if you have an extended no lapse guarantee that is to well beyond life expectancy, age 120, 121, 125, depending on the carrier, well, they're never going to outlive that. You may have a range of outcomes of as little as whatever the original guaranteed death benefit is, all the way up to seeing appreciation. And you're going to have a range of those outcomes depending on the underlying sub-accounts. But for a fact that with the extended no lapse guarantee, that amount of initial death benefit will be actually delivered. So same exact thing with IUL, same exact thing with guaranteed UL, right? All of these things, when they have extended no lapse guarantees, you are transferring that risk entirely. You are retaining some degree of it in the IUL and the VUL world of performance when it comes to the ability for the cash value to grow, hit corridor, and drive the net death benefit up, right? And so if it underperforms, that will not happen. And so, your cost to actually acquire the death benefit may be higher, but there's all of these mechanisms that you can do to effectively, de-risk these kind of policies. The question in my mind of, any of these universal life-based guaranteed sort of fully guaranteed kind of products versus, let's say, a whole life is, what's the cost benefit analysis? Because there's a difference in acquisition cost.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You're saying in whole life, if you did the same thing with whole life, we wouldn't get anywhere near 15 million.
Yeah. So
correct. That's exactly right. If you took the same premium as any, even with an extended no lapse guarantee, IUL, UL, or VUL, you are not buying as much death benefit. Now, you have a degree of appreciation of the non-guaranteed dividend that is very likely, I would argue, to continue. Right. And you obviously are stress testing, I would hope, whole life contracts as well, not just selling it, hey, this is the dividend rate today, but most carrier software of whole life policies that we've sold, we dial back dividend assumptions as well. Show 50 basis points or 75 basis points.
I would imagine an apples to apples comparison would be not really caring about the cash value. It would just go to a fully base contract. And
that's the equivalent.
And I would, and again, I'm asking this as just a host that might know nothing. If you sell a whole life policy for estate planning, is there a world, like talk to me about the world where at like 95, could it blow up if you're not using it for income? Or is there
in a whole life policy?
Just underperform? Like if dividends were going to be at a certain level, the death benefit might be higher, but it's my understanding that the death benefit wouldn't go away. It just may be less than the original illustration.
So that's what this shows here on the screen. So he's 100% right? So again, I just will ask, because I didn't see it in there, on this particular product, what was the no lapse guarantee? Because I don't want to be talking about other products. I want to talk about what was submitted and an alternative to what was submitted. I am totally in agreement that there are GULs, IULs that you can adjust the parameters to show a no lapse guarantee to age 120 or 110 or whatever you want to show. Totally.
It's going to get expensive.
It's going to be more expensive than
relative
what I
to what?
feel. And correct me if I'm wrong. Say that again. Sorry.
Oh, Revan was just saying it's going to be expensive, and I said it depends. Relative to what, right? Like if we're comparing here to a whole life contract, let's say, I would argue that even if you put an extended no lapse guarantee on,
it's going to be cheaper than
guaranteed UL, guaranteed IUL, guaranteed UL, the premiums for the same acquisition of death benefit will be lesser.
Absolutely.
Now you're not going to see the dividend, right?
For sure.
Paid up additions and increase the amount of death benefit. It will have to be a measure of the credit of IUL or VUL sort of crediting, growing that, and that's where the sort of risk. The risk.
You're missing one piece. So on all these contracts, and I just want to make it, do you agree that, especially with the one that was submitted, and I didn't see a no lapse guarantee age 100. It looked like it was to 85. And then obviously with the assumptions, it pushed to 89. So correct me if I'm wrong there. But when it comes to these IULs, the risk is, and Caleb, I'm going to ask you, is there a chance in the world that if you committed to something like this and you were 80, that you would potentially want the ability to stop making premium payments? Is there a chance? Because GULs with these, you really need to. You don't have to, right? Because they're flexible premiums. But this illustration that I tested is assuming you make all the premiums. What happens if things come up?
And you don't take a loan.
And no loans, right? So again, I'm just running in force that was provided. But there's a lot of things that can happen. And so, and I'm agreeing with you.
Let me ask Jonathan, is in a policy like this, we don't have to talk about this specific one, but a policy like this, if someone wanted to stop paying the $50,000, could they reduce the face amount? Because in a whole life, you can do a reduce paid up. And to answer your question, John, to answer your question, Tyler, of course, I mean, but again, you could be dealing with a billionaire, and this is a rounding error. You know what I'm saying? So it's
absolutely.
I highly doubt this is coming out of cash flow. That's what I'm trying to say.
Look, you're asking a good question, and I think it's important for people to know, because I see IULs missold in this manner a lot. There is no ability to do a reduced paid up equivalent in any universal life-based contract, right? You can go, and let's say in the example that I gave with an extended no lapse guarantee, it's as simple as pay X amount of premium either per year or in aggregate that satisfies the extended no lapse guarantee, and then you can stop paying. And your policy is effectively, quote unquote, paid up. You have fulfilled the amount of premium obligation to meet that death benefit guarantee, and you will not owe any more premium. But in the illustration that we're talking about here, no, that does not exist. When you have a no lapse guarantee that is to 85, 90, 95, to your point, you cannot simply reduce pay it up. There may be a scenario in which, Caleb, you have to do one of two things: put in more premium as to satisfy and get it past life expectancy, or reduce the amount of death benefit. But even reducing the amount of death benefit only ensures a higher probability of a positive outcome. That is, the policy is in force at the time of the individual's death. It does not effectively guarantee, like a reduced paid up policy would of whole life, that it's with 100% certainty that policy will be in effect at the person's death.
It, hypothetically speaking, let's say they're at age 95 and there's no cash value and there needs to be more money put in just to keep it afloat. Do you know what that number would be? Because you'd be it'd be a no-brainer to keep
it's
$15 million.
It's an entirely depending on the construct of the specific product, of the health risks, the underwriting outcome at the onset, right? At the age of it, male or female, depending on the charges.
But you would know that at the time, like you would know that perk. Like you could say like, hey, at 95, it's $1 million.
Any good and diligent agent should be on any universal life-based contract, having annual policy reviews with their client, whether they go and have the conversation with the client or on their own internal processes, are doing stress testing on an ongoing basis. And yes, if there's ever a scenario in which a policy is lapsing well short of life expectancy, they should absolutely be having the conversation with the client, even if it's an uncomfortable one, of these are your options. Put in more premium, reduce the death benefit, or assume a degree of performance risk that may not end up in your favor.
Can I say one thing real quick? So I agree with everything you just said, and that's cool. Jonathan, how old are you? Do you mind me asking you publicly?
I'm 38. No, I don't.
38. Yeah. Okay. So we're talking about things that are, one of my challenges with this, and one of the reasons that I really struggle with using this type of product in this scenario is that, I mean, you're obviously educated, you obviously know your thing, you do the right thing. I truly believe that you, from an integrity perspective, want to do the right thing. Like I believe that. Like and it's very rare that I can say that about an IUL agent that I meet, but I believe that about you. And that's like the ultimate compliment I could ever give you.
I a little bit disagree with the fundamental characterization of a quote unquote IUL agent. Like Caleb and I talked about.
Sure.
I'm an insurance agent, right? Like I'm an insurance
Sure.
I am not
We've
so
all
wedded
sold IUL
to the product.
Fair enough. But I'm talking when I say,
but sure, I get you.
Fair enough. When I say IUL agent, I mean like with a high focus on using IUL as a product. That's just for what
I would tell you, for us, much more VUL than IUL in terms of the actual, but a fair assessment, Revan.
Okay, so my only challenge that I have with this is that it's assumed, like we all know how complicated that this can get. We all know that companies handle orphan clients like crap, and they don't handle them well. And so what happens 45 years down the road when your client's in this position and they're faced with tough challenges of funding it more, doing a reduce in the face amount, to be able to increase the chances to, like, all the different options. I don't need to rehash all the options that you just talked about. What happens if you're not there? If you pass away at 70, 75, if you're retired, if you're out of the business, and like they have nobody to support them, like nobody talks about that risk that comes along with these types of plans.
Yeah, I think you make a great point in that it's not often discussed. The answer is succession planning, right? The same way that business owners it behooves them to go and have a pretty clearly defined, whether it's intra-family or external, in terms of what the sale of the business would look like. You should be planning on a future in which you are either not involved because of death or disability, or you decide to retire, right? And what does that look like? Well, I got into this business young enough that there's an entire handful of predominantly agents in their 60s and 70s retiring, and there's great opportunity to work with sort of those clients of them that they're leaving the business. I think anybody, and Tyler, maybe you and I, and Revan, you're maybe a couple years older, but as all sort of people in this insurance space, within 10 years-ish from each other. Yeah. All right, Revan, my apologies. I didn't mean that.
Okay, I just turned 46. It's okay. I'm old.
So all within 10 years of each other, right? Caleb's the young gun here, and maybe Tyler also to some degree as well. There's great opportunity in this industry, right? The great opportunity is for you to stay in this industry and be that person for your clients for multiple decades. And if you do that consistently, I think the opportunity is endless. But there is a responsibility on the agent to have a degree of a continuity sort of plan, and also to continue to do policy reviews, to continue to do the right thing ethically on behalf of your client. Right. There is much more of a risk when in the universal life-based world of that not occurring than in a whole life, in which, not to say it's set it and forget it, right? But there's an element of the guarantees that the carrier provides and an element of the non-guaranteed dividend, but they still, is a high probability of it coming to fruition that sort of devolves, or I should say de-involves the actual agent and their importance from the equation.
Yeah, totally. I just thought of something that this is a dangerous thing to put out there. All the arguments and debates when it comes to IUL, usually the number one premise is I'm doing it the right way, which no one's going to disagree with that. I know people that work with very wealthy families that do a lot of VUL, IUL, some whole life. And it's like, yeah, it makes sense. They're on a different level than maybe someone just getting into a MLM that's, selling insurance, IULs. But I would love to actually hear someone represent who's not in the space, like representing an industry in specific, and like look, and they're welcome to come on the show, like come on the show and say, no, index unit, like this is actually good for the insurance space. This is good for security and protection. Like we got NAFA, Finseca, we have other out there. I'd just be really curious to like see over a whole, because there are people getting insured and all, but I think we can all agree on this call that if the statistics are more than 80%, which I believe they are, of people getting in and then leaving, and you maybe aren't even with like you're not wealthy and all this stuff, and I'm not saying whole life there's similar problems, but it's there's more guardrails just by how the product is structured. So it's just it's an open invite for an IUL apologist from an industry perspective, or maybe from an insurance company. You're welcome to come on, because I would love to hear that perspective, because everyone that has come on that has defended these type of policies, always with the asterisk is, hey, we're doing this the right way. We have, and which I 100% agree. And I think on the same standpoint, whole life has the same challenge, is like we give the same disclaimer. We do whole life, we're doing it quote unquote the right way. But we've seen a lot of whole life not done the right way. So then it begs the question, on the grand scheme of things, can we all stand by like the practices that typical whole life is sold? And I would probably say all of us would probably agree that majority of even whole life sold wouldn't be something that we would want to maybe put our name behind. Revan, and then I want to get to actually Tyler. Tyler, you're going to show like a whole life comparison. I think that's going to be important for this video.
Yeah, that's going to be important. Yeah, I mean, I would say this, to that is like,
and then I got to hop. So
okay, I agree with you, and I think the real like element of that video is the right way is there is no right way. There's no right or wrong. It's aligned or misaligned with the client's goals. And Jonathan talks about it all the time. It's about being an advisor and like really consulting and figuring out like what problem are we really trying to solve here. I think the difference between right and wrong is like if a wrong policy is building a policy, like Caleb, if I were selling you a policy and you said, hey, I want high cash value, right? Because I want to use it for ABC. And I made you a policy that was less on the cash value, more on the death benefit, and it took longer. So if I make a mistake and I do that, or maybe I'm a nefarious agent and I did it on purpose or something to commission hawk or whatever, time is going to solve all those problems. That policy, the longer it's enforced with whole life, the better it's going to get. It's going to catch up. It's going to make good. It's going to be decent 20, 30, 40 years from now. With IUL, if I do that, that policy, time compounds all the problems. So in whole life, time will fix the problems. In IUL and VUL, time kind of compounds the problems. And so there's more of a requirement of the agent to, be at a certain level to help manage and all that stuff. And so it's I don't believe in right or wrong. I believe in like what problem are we trying to solve. I don't even think there's a right or wrong design for whole life. I know plenty of agents that never sell a high early cash value whole life policy. It's 100% base, and they stand by that, and they solve like the estate planning issue, and it is what it is.
That's my point. It's getting really clear with the outcome and designing for that. But let's, Tyler, I know time is going to, can you show?
Go when we look at the risk, right? So to me, it's all about the risk analysis, right? Which I'll support what Jonathan was saying, right? When we look at cost of insurance, if this thing doesn't perform, and this is the in-force illustration, you're talking about... And we're just
assuming, again, 4% every year, no upside, no down in this illustration.
Correct, 3.82% every single year, nothing else, right? The one I was showing before, the calculator, that was taking into account all different things with the cap of 8%. That's what the cap is. Okay. So, but here, if it does start to have an issue in the late 80s, right, for the second insured, 89, the cost of insurance is $600,000 a year to keep this thing going. So that can become a huge risk, so it's not a small amount to fix the problem. And at 89, you don't have any other choices. Like you've put in $2 million into this thing at this point in time. Do you really want to watch it just fall apart, like in arguably your last 5 years of life, right?
Well, the other option, right, is to decrease the face amount.
Yeah, I mean, okay, we decrease it by 50%, and let's just say, okay, now I've put in $2 million for a $7.5 million death benefit, and the cost of insurance is still $300,000. I mean, that's
also where, right, the role of the manager is. The enforces, go in effectively, do the stress testing, get out what the actual, total amount of maximum death benefit is with, again, realistic life, expectancy sort of calculations. These are all conversations to have with clients at various different stages of the policy.
Jonathan, you're saying at age 95, if this is the first time you're talking about this, that's a problem. Like at 70, you could take a look. At 80, you could take a look. 90, you could take a look.
Those are 10-year increments. I mean, I think increasingly in any UL policy, as the person reaches a point in which the cost of insurance is substantial relative to the policy value, you start doing, not only you're, consistently doing annual policy reviews, but you're talking to clients more about managing that risk if it exists.
I was just talking to somebody the other day, and they handle orphan clients for IULs, big IUL, like for a big IUL company, and they work at the corporate level. And this person just had a conversation with somebody in this exact situation. Like literally, I had this conversation with this guy 4 days ago. It was on Saturday. And the person was basically saying, what do I do? And they had to come out with like a $250,000 premium to keep it in force. And they were kind of at that place because the agent disappeared and all this stuff. And they basically left the conversation with the person being like, if I kill myself, will the insurance company pay? So when you start having conversations like that and you realize like that's actually the potentiality of where this can end up at the end of somebody's life, like, I guess like to me, that's leadership is like, there's one thing and there's different styles, right? And so Jonathan, you have a different style than I do. I think we both agree that we want to show people what's on the table, right? But where I differ is like, if I'm selling Caleb an idea and I get it on the table, to me, it's like knowing what I know, it's my job to lead Caleb to be like, hey, I know what you're thinking, you want to plan on best case, you want to plan on this and that, but like, like what problem are we really trying to solve here? And if it doesn't go the way that you think, are you willing to be this person that has to make that phone call and is questioning often yourself to make all this happen? You know what I mean?
I just think it has to be accounted for. Like there is upfront, the difference is the premium difference, right? Like, yeah, there is more certainty in terms of the guaranteed function of whole life than there is life expectancy related guarantees of universal life-based products, for sure. But there's a difference in the acquisition costs over time. And so if you took that same difference and either put it back into the universal life-based policy, you would get better outcomes. Or if you simply went and said, okay, I'm going to invest it in a taxable brokerage account and some sort of mix of, equities, whatever, or bonds or other sort of assets, do you wind up with a better net outcome than the purely take the premium in a whole life and put it in there? You can easily make the case. So I don't think it's always just as simple as, right, hey, one is more risky than the other. Certainly that risk needs to be acknowledged, but there's a trade-off to the acceptance of the risk, and that's in premium savings.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's fundamentally the difference of why we have favored historically universal life-based products for estate and wealth transfer with guarantees than selling whole life contracts is the acquisition cost alone. And that could be just a different philosophical opinion, and it's fine. I'll never disagree with people. Again, New York Life, my first, sort of stop in this business with people who philosophically are like, hey, I'm whole life purist because I have a much more known outcome in the end. And I would like to go and effectively, as a risk transfer, tool, convey a degree of certainty to the client that doesn't have to have all of this explanation and all of these moving parts and all of this ongoing policy review and maintenance. That is part of the universal life-based conversation, like it or not.
Yeah, totally. I agree with that. 100%.
All right,
Tyler, keep going.
Let's move on. Tyler, I'm seeing whole life. It seems like you're
whole life. It's a mass mutual survivorship. Again, I cannot run one from 10 years ago. So Kate, everything take with a grain of salt. This one I'm picking up. All right, hold on. Picking up from year 11, which is the in-force illustration. So I'm just trying to keep this very simple, very basic, very nothing creative, nothing hidden. It is a 50-50 blended policy, dividend reduction by 10% with a crossover of 90 for those really detail-oriented people. Just giving the guidelines. Not saying this is the best design. I just kind of put it together.
Is there a reason, I'm just not to pick your design apart, is there a reason why you didn't just do full base and have a greater death benefit?
Well, if we're comparing for a max death benefit, right? Like I want to
but that's the whole point of correct me if I'm wrong, but the whole point of this is no cash value build up, just death benefit.
Correct. So I wanted to there's ways to design whole life you could start at a lower death benefit amount, same premium, like an all base policy, and it will grow immediately. There's also ways to design them for a little bit more focused on death benefit. Certain carriers call it different things, but blends, LISR, Penn calls it whatever, EBIR or something, they all have it's a term blend rider. Essentially, it's their form of making it more like a GUL. As you can see, $10 million stays level. And then at age 93 is when that crossover happens. So essentially, there's some risk here as well, right? But the risk is just on an automatic death benefit reduction. So dividend reduction is already assumed. And then I also have a essential 7-year window of also dividends being lower to adjust for that crossover period, right?
Yeah. So it's pretty black and white that if you're dealing with someone, you look at the probability, you look at pros and cons, and someone who's sophisticated might say, I love my chances of 15 million. I'll invest the difference. If I have an estate problem, we can cross that barrier. And then someone else could look at that and say, I would go crazy with the even thought of losing 15 million, like I'm $2 million in and having nothing to show for it. Whereas on the whole life side at that same time, you have $5 million less of death benefit, but you have $8 million, almost $8.5 million of cash value that you could utilize. Am I seeing that right, Jonathan? Like that's the conversation you have with your clients?
Yeah. I mean, some of it is just, again, like how much risk do you want to go and take? And again, we're talking about people who are used to taking risk in various different portions of their life with their business owners, or if they're very highly compensated W-2 employees or whatever, they're utilizing risk in other aspects of their financial life in terms of accumulation assets. Now, is this something that you want to incorporate into this specific area? That's a very individual sort of consideration. A lot of the time when we're doing guaranteed variable within an irrevocable life insurance trust, we obviously stress test and different rate of return assumptions, et cetera. The client acknowledges that if things go really south, that guaranteed death benefit, the original death benefit, is all that will be the net to the islet, right? And if you had gone and taken that same amount of premium and put it into a whole life, the net result to the trust would be greater in a whole life if the VUL underperforms because of the sub-account. But this is where, hey, look, the client is in their 50s or early 60s, and maybe their life expectancy remains 25, 30, 35 years. What are the compound annual growth rates over that 30 or 35-year period of this specific asset mix? What's the likelihood of success? What's the probability of failure? This is where, we're doing all of that testing on behalf of clients to quantify for them, hey, look, if it does 6, if it does 5, if it does 7, it does 8, this is the net outcome to the trust versus the alternative. Take the premium of a greater amount, put it into a whole life. This is the probability of outcome. This is the range of outcomes depending on what the dividend looks like over a long period of time. It's a hard thing to do. I mean, it's basically, right, buy the better bond over a long period of time. Well, is that good from an inflation adjusted standpoint? You can make the debate yes or no. Buy the equity over a long period of time. Is it much, much better? Again, different risk profile, right? So we're having a different conversation, but all of these things need to be considered if you're doing, really your due diligence on behalf of a client in presenting the full spectrum of risk.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with comparing products, but I have from all of the high-end estate plans that I've been a part of. When I was with MassMutual, I got to see almost all their premium finance out of the South region for a while because I was more of a payer planner when I first started with them. Almost every high level, my mentors are 30 years in the business, so they all sold VULs in the 80s, so they've been around longer than literally. My mentor just hit 34 years in the business. She was Northwestern for 20, MassMutual for 15, and now is a career contract. None of her VULs worked. None of the IULs worked. And she had to have tough conversations because they were sold certain ways. So when she started explaining risk for high net worth people of this, hey, you potentially have a 60% chance, 70% chance of putting $2 million in there to, have this 10 million, most of them are like, well, I'd rather just take a little less insurance, get the guarantees of whole life, and invest the difference. I find it hard to believe, and that I've never had somebody be like, unless it's a true, like Caleb mentioned very in the beginning, a few of my very high net worth, $100 million, where they're carving out 1% of their portfolio to buy, a GUL policy where like, yeah, I'm going to pay this premium every single year because I'm literally funding it with 0.5% of my account.
Yeah.
They can adjust as times go by, but
I think if you're wealthy,
do not.
I think if you're wealthy, you could probably assume a greater than 4% return just in your portfolio over a long period of time. So it really does come down to, but I'm with you. I think and again, I'm doing the same thing that I criticize. It's like, it's looking at the top example, which we're looking, because you'll be the first to say this is a very, very well designed policy, and yet you guys are seeing lots that don't even hold the candle to this. Is there another thing that you want to show?
Yeah. So his other IUL, very good. So number one, Jonathan, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was a lump sum about $277,000. It
was a 1035,
1035. Okay, that's what I was.
Yeah.
So it was a 1035. So one thing that I would ask is, where did that 1035 come from? Was it a bad UL, bad IUL, or IULs weren't, like, I have a hard time thinking it was coming from an IUL because they weren't really around 12 years ago. So it came from a whole life, right?
Yes.
And so we pulled money out of a whole life to buy, and your assumption is good. So I stress test this one, right? At the 8% cap, right? And essentially 95, 100% probability of success, even at 100, looks good, right? So again, nothing wrong with this. I think this is fine, right? Where my, it was a one-time 277. I'm going to show the other screen in a second. $830,000 of death benefit, right? And that was essentially, unless it really overperforms, is essentially a level death benefit. Is that a
correct?
Okay,
yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so totally nothing wrong with selling it this way, right? I would argue, like, what would it have looked like if you took a reduced paid up on the whole life versus 1035ing it out? I would make some questions of what does that look like to see a true apples to apples comparison, because we talk about this based on this design, I'm assuming this was for legacy death benefit protection, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So if legacy and death benefit protection was the main goal, then the risk pool of where this guy was assuming a lot of the risk is he was 66, right? 65. And we rolled out of this whole life. Where did in my opinion, when people are looking at estate stuff, they're really paying attention to, and I'm not saying this particular case, right? But in my experience, they're really looking for, hey, when I'm 80, right? When I'm 75, 80, that earlier years, they're not as worried because they can supplement with term. They can, they're still working, right? So they have that term coverage. I'm not saying this guy still did or anything like that, right? But the purpose of the legacy is really in those mortality years, correct? Like the mortality table.
Yeah, if you want to hear an interesting story. So this individual actually passed away this past year. When we were going to have this call, I think the consideration, right, was like, if he took either his existing 1035 money within a whole life policy and moved it to a new, more efficient whole life policy, or just kept it as is, like, what's the amount of net death benefit? The fundamental reason why we see exchanges from, whole life to universal life based death benefit oriented contracts with guarantees is it buying up just so much more death benefit at life expectancy. And in this instance, and again, this is an anecdotal one, right? This person's life expectancy was much longer than in reality his actual life, but there's no way that his existing whole life would have actually delivered a larger death benefit now, or even at life expectancy, right? I mean, that's the fundamental, benefit of, in this case, an IUL with a guarantee to around life expectancy and, current assumption component to it is he was able to buy up, basically almost twice as much death benefit at what his projected life expectancy was with the same amount of premium outlay.
Yeah, well, I got two things, and then because I know we're running out of time. So
yeah,
so
I want to wrap it up too.
One thing I'll say is I find it hard to believe that it was going to be twice as little at life expectancy, because I ran a Lafayette Life Whole Life, which I'll be totally transparent. I do not like their single pay product. So you heard it here first, but there's not too many whole life single pay products out there anymore. Not to mention, I don't know what the whole life product he was in with the reduced paid up, right? And how that would grow. But even doing it that way, it grows to 765,000. So it's not that far off at age 90. So that's number one. Number two, I also only showed 250,000 because if he was worried about that initial 10-year between 65 and 75, you could take 25 grand, buy a 10-year term policy and get more insurance during those risk years, right? But to me, the end of the day, you want the insurance to be there when it paid out, right? So again, this policy would have worked, right? Do I agree philosophically of the way of removing it out of something that has less risk? Again, I don't know anything about the whole life where it came from, right? But there are a lot of agents, and I just want to say this before, that are moving things out of whole life to put into IULs for income. And then those people can be and selling this vision. And that is a huge problem that I see in the industry. And I see it.
I will just say, Revan, before you wrap up, just one last thing on this design in short term, right? In terms of in the early years, you're talking about the additional acquisition cost of more premium into a term policy to basically bridge that gap. Whereas the initial purchase in this case, the IUL, bought up so much more death benefit in the short term that effectively the risk of premature death relative to life expectancy, in that respect, there is an additional component that needs to be done in order for a whole life for the dividend to continue to compound over time. Whereas in this instance, in this IUL, not necessary, right? It's buying the maximum amount of death benefit from day one as a level death benefit and keeping that in perpetuity to life expectancy or beyond.
Absolutely. I mean, I actually have sold a few of these John Hancock protection policies back in the day as a GUL, essentially, right? And so these are one of the ones that you can actually really run guaranteed assumptions. They have, they used to have the little asset, like at year 11, you'd get that little persistency bonus.
Always fun.
And so those are some of the things that we aren't allowed in our challenges.
Right.
The enhancers and these like all of these multipliers and all this stuff. Not that any of those have worked. There's a reason why Pac Life's getting sued around over theirs, but there's a reason why. And so again, it's product, but I just want to close with like 80% of IULs are being sold for income in retirement, and that's based on the product name, not to mention the ones that are selling a protected IUL and then showing loans. And that is what our challenge is trying to target. We're not here to target the GUL guy that's selling IULs for running 3 to 4% rate of return assumptions in their illustrations to show some legacy plan. That is not our intention.
Tyler, thank you. Revan, any final words?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think this was, it was a fun conversation. It's funny, we came in to have the IUL challenge conversation. It ended up being this like estate planning theory concept conversation, which I think is really valuable. And I think
we need more.
I think we covered some things that were valuable and beneficial to people. And I think it's important that people understand, like, Jonathan, what you're saying for this is like, when I say IUL can work and it does work, like, I don't mean for cash value. I mean like this. I mean, like, you can put guaranteed riders on it, like, and use it like a hybrid GUL. And there are instances where that makes sense. There's more death benefit leverage. But like I say it all the time, make no mistake about it. Everything in the life insurance business is actuarially priced. And so if you're going to get from 15 million with a UL chassis product to 10 million with a whole life product, it's actuarially priced in because of the level of certainty that it's being done with. And just know, Caleb, you and I have talked about this for years. What's the upside? What's the downside? Can I live with the downside? And so really having that conversation at that point in time, or if you're making this decision for yourself, think about it. Like, if you got to that point and it didn't work, could you come up with $250,000, $600,000 in this example? Could you come up with that? Would you want to? What would your life be like if that happened? That's the downside potential. And if you can't live with that, I would stress really strongly to consider the alternatives to make sure that you can create a plan that actually takes that risk off the table. But if coming up with 600 grand is no big deal, well, then have at it, go get her.
And Jonathan, even though I'm late for my next meeting, I want to give you the final words here. I do appreciate you coming on.
I want to thank you obviously thank you for hosting. I mean, I said before when you invited me for the first time, you have a great platform. You do a great job in education. I feel the same way about Life 180 and the content they put out. Revan for years has put out really good content, not only about this, but also other aspects as well. And so, my criticism was not as it relates to the content that you put out or the education that you put forth in the space, but on specifically the challenge. I still have my perspective of it. Maybe we just differ on perspective of, effectively some of the messaging and things of that nature. But I do think, it led to a constructive conversation. And I think that we hopefully touched on some things that are good from a consumer standpoint. And, I'll look forward to future conversations in the space and that hopefully we can have.
If you're watching this and you have a policy that can beat the IUL challenge, make sure you screenshot the terms and conditions.
Yeah, there you go.
With the timestamp, submit it, and then we'll run it back. Gentlemen, thank you so much. I do appreciate just the nature of this conversation. I think that overall, hopefully this inspires more people to just talk. And I'm very grateful for you all. And so I hope you all have a great rest of your day. If you're watching this and you appreciate the work that we're doing, would love for you to subscribe. I know Life 180, you have a channel. Go subscribe to them. Please share your thoughts in the comments. And if you have other people that we should be having conversations with, if you have people that disagree that are willing to come on a platform, would love to host it. And so with that, thank you so much for making these conversations possible, because we wouldn't have these conversations if no one was watching or listening. With that, guys, thank you. Take care. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day.